Welcome back to our lecture series on sustainable finance. We arrive at part F and a topic that sounds like science fiction but is fast becoming serious finance: carbon removal and, briefly, geoengineering. So far, everything has been about emitting less. But it turns out that cutting emissions by itself is not enough to reach net zero, and that opens up a whole new frontier of technology, markets, and investment. Let's see why and what it means for finance. Here's the uncomfortable arithmetic of net zero. No matter how hard we cut, some emissions are extremely hard to eliminate, from aviation, from cement, from agriculture. These residual, hard-to-abate emissions won't reach zero anytime soon. So net zero doesn't mean zero emissions. It means balancing whatever emissions remain against an equal amount of carbon actively removed from the atmosphere. That's what carbon dioxide removal, CDR, does. It captures carbon dioxide and stores it durably. And I want you to hold on to one crucial distinction that runs through this whole topic. Removal is not the same as avoidance. Avoiding an emission means not putting carbon up in the first place. Removal means taking carbon that's already in the air back out. The IPCC is clear that some carbon removal is now unavoidable for reaching net zero, estimating that something like 7 to 9 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year may need to be removed by mid-century. That's an enormous number, roughly a fifth of today's total emissions removed every year. But, and this caveat is essential, removal must complement deep emission cuts, not delay them. The great danger is that the promise of future removal becomes an excuse to keep emitting now. Removal is the mop. It is not a license to keep flooding the floor. The carbon removal landscape splits neatly into two families, with a fundamental trade-off between them. The first family is conventional, nature-based removal: afforestation and reforestation, planting trees, soil carbon sequestration, storing carbon in farmland, and blue carbon, carbon stored in coastal ecosystems like mangroves. These methods are cheap and scalable today, but they have lower durability and a real reversal risk. The carbon can come back out if a forest burns or is cut down. The second family is novel, durable, engineered removal: bioenergy with carbon capture, known as BECCS, direct air capture and storage, DACCS, enhanced rock weathering, and biochar. These offer durable storage, locking carbon away for centuries or geological timescales, but they are costly and tiny today. So there's the core tension of carbon removal. In one line, nature-based methods are cheap but leaky. Engineered methods are permanent but expensive and barely scaled. Almost every debate in this field comes back to that trade-off between cost, scale, and durability. Let's look at the nature-based family more closely, because it's where most removal happens today. Afforestation and reforestation, planting new forests or restoring lost ones, is the classic approach, behind big initiatives like the Bonn Challenge, which pledged to restore 350 million hectares, and the Trillion Trees campaigns. Soil carbon sequestration uses regenerative farming practices that store more carbon in the soil, sold to buyers as soil carbon credits. And blue carbon restores coastal ecosystems, mangroves, seagrass, and salt marshes, which are astonishingly effective carbon sinks. A landmark example is Mikoko Pamoja in Kenya, the world's first blue carbon credit project, where a coastal community earns credits for protecting its mangroves. The appeal of all these is that they're cheap and come with wonderful co-benefits: biodiversity, flood protection, livelihoods. But return to the durability problem. This storage can reverse. A forest can burn in a wildfire or be illegally logged, and all that stored carbon rushes back into the air. And it's genuinely hard to measure exactly how much carbon a given forest or field is really storing. So nature-based removal is valuable and should be scaled. But a ton stored in a tree is a weaker, riskier promise than a ton locked underground. This image shows nature-based removal in action: a community planting mangroves along a coastline. It's worth pausing on because it captures everything appealing about this approach. Everything appealing about this approach. The carbon gets stored as blue carbon in the coastal sediments, often more densely than in a rainforest. But look at what else is happening in the picture. Local people are directly involved, earning income. The mangroves will shelter the coast from storms and erosion. Exactly the climate adaptation we discussed in the insurance chapter. And the restored ecosystem becomes a nursery for fish. This is carbon removal with a whole bundle of social and ecological co-benefits attached. It's the human, hopeful face of carbon removal, and a reminder that the cheapest climate solutions are often the ones that also help people and nature directly. Now, the high-tech family, engineered removal, which is where a lot of the investment excitement lives. Direct air capture and storage, DACCS, uses machines that literally filter carbon dioxide out of the ambient air and then store it underground. The pioneer is the Swiss firm Climeworks, whose Icelandic plants, named Orca, capturing around 4,000 tons a year, and the larger Mammoth, around 36,000 tons, are among the first of their kind. And Occidental's Stratus plant in Texas aims for 500,000 tons a year. BECCS, bioenergy with carbon capture, burns biomass for energy and captures the resulting carbon dioxide. Britain's Drax power station is piloting exactly this. And there's enhanced rock weathering from firms like Undu and Lithos, and biochar, which lock carbon into minerals or stable char. The great virtue of these engineered methods is that they're durable, storing carbon for centuries or longer, and measurable, which makes them high integrity. But keep the scale in perspective. They are expensive and tiny today. Notice the numbers I just gave, thousands or tens of thousands of tons a year, against a need measured in billions of tons. Engineered removal is real and improving fast, but right now it's a rounding error against the problem. Here you can see a direct air capture unit, one of these Climeworks installations. Take a good look because it's a striking machine. Giant banks of fans draw ordinary air through filters that chemically grab the carbon dioxide molecules. The captured carbon is then concentrated and pumped deep underground, where it mineralizes into rock and stays put, essentially permanently. It's an almost miraculous idea, a machine that cleans the sky. But as you look at it, hold two thoughts together. On one hand, this is genuine, permanent, measurable carbon removal, the gold standard for integrity. On the other, these plants are enormously energy hungry and expensive, and one facility removes only a few thousand tons a year. So this photograph shows both the promise and the problem of engineered removal at once. The technology works, but scaling it from thousands of tons to billions, affordably, is one of the great challenges of the century. And here is the other main engineered approach. Britain's Drax power station, which is piloting bioenergy with carbon capture, BECCS. The concept is clever and worth understanding. You grow biomass, trees, plants, which pulls carbon dioxide out of the air as it grows. You then burn that biomass to generate electricity, and, crucially, you capture the carbon dioxide released by the burning and store it underground instead of letting it escape. If it all works, the net effect is negative emissions. You've generated power while actually removing carbon from the atmosphere. That's the theory, and it's why the IPCC's models lean heavily on BECCS. But it's genuinely contested. Critics question whether the biomass is truly sustainable, whether burning imported wood pellets really is carbon negative once you count everything, and whether it competes with land needed for food and nature. So Drax embodies the whole difficulty of engineered removal, elegant in principle, but full of hard, real-world questions about whether the carbon accounting truly adds up. Let's recap. Net zero requires not just cutting emissions, but removing carbon, perhaps 7 to 9 gigatons a year by mid-century. And removal must complement, never delay, deep cuts. The landscape splits into cheap but leaky nature-based methods, like forests and blue carbon mangroves, and durable but tiny engineered methods, like direct air capture and BECCS. In the final video of part 10, we look at how all this removal gets financed, what it costs, the enormous gap between what's needed and what's delivered, the strange world of solar geoengineering, and we draw the whole chapter together. See you there.